welcome back to Open Bible, Open Life. My name is Pastor Spencer, and I'm here with Pastor Kyle, and we are here today to talk about a very important and very old topic, which is idolatry or idols. And I think we need to start this podcast by just me asking you this question. In college,
what is my biggest idol?
In college, did you watch American Idol? Did you ever go through an American Idol phase?
Oh, yeah. So I went through a phase where the golden buzzer phase. Do you know what I'm talking about? So, okay, here, let me explain this to you.
Okay.
So in American Idol,
yep.
I don't know what season they started doing this in, but it was a genius move. There is a season where from then on, like for the last 5 years, each judge can one time a season not just hit the button to go, I love this person, but gets to hit the golden buzzer that brings them all the way to the final round. So I think I have watched every golden buzzer moment. I just went on YouTube because, dude, they are if you want to tear up, you watch some 12-year-old girl sing and Simon go, you're going all the way. And the music ramps up and the video goes to slow-mo and he hits the buzzer. She freaks out. Every time they hit the buzzer, gold, what do you call that? Like sparkle? Streamers fall down. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so the answer is yes, I've seen American Idol. Sure. And I've loved it.
I can remember I was in middle school and high school, and it was huge. This was back when you didn't record TV shows. You had to be there on Wednesday night
American Idol was massive. Let me tell you, I'm older than you. Do you remember Planet Earth?
No.
Oh, dude, when I was in college, Planet Earth was like the first time. Now Netflix has like 100 of these. It was the first time it was like released once a week, and it was like this time it's going to be an hour on elephants in Africa, and the cinematography was just incredible. So, all right, so American Idol, I see where you're going with this. So we're talking about idols, and it's a word that we even use today.
That's American right. Do you have any go-to definitions for idols or idolatry?
I have like 10.
Give me just a few. Let's talk about it.
As a pastor, you have to have, as a teaching pastor, you have to have a definition for everything.
Yep.
So, okay, I go back and forth. We can actually, you and I can debate, like which one of these are, and these, one or two of these might be mine, probably not. One, as I heard a guy say, once I hear something, it's hard for me to unhear it. So I don't know where I got all these. Worshiping the creation over the creator. Okay, that's probably the most biblical in the sense of Romans 1. Literally what Paul says. Yep. He adds to it, exchanging the truth for a lie, which is deep. And then he says, you do that first, and then you worship the creation of the creator. A couple other things. Taking a good thing and making it a God thing. So that, I love that because I think a lot of times we think about idolatry and we think, what deep, dark secret do you have? It's like, no, it's your boyfriend. No, it's your job. It's a good thing you made a God thing.
Yep.
I think if you want to take that one more level internally, it's when a desire becomes a demand. I learned that in my biblical counseling class. So it's like there's nothing wrong with this, assuming this is a good desire.
That's right.
Desire to be married, good.
Yes.
Demand to be married, idol.
That's right.
Desire to have kids, good. Demand to have kids, idol.
Oh, yeah.
The other ones those are probably my best, like when I think of it in a moment. You think about in the New Testament, Paul talks about idolatry, and then he says, I think this is in Colossians, Paul says idolatry, ... which is covetousness. So it's like, I think what Paul means is it's the intense longing for something in an unhealthy way, which I kind of already got at. And then also another synonym is spiritual adultery.
Yes.
So there's a lot there. I mean, I do think we'll make it into this. I mean, it would have to be a meta theme of the Old Testament that's picked up in the New Testament, but it is a mega meta theme.
Yes. From
the golden calf on.
Yes.
And maybe before. But from the golden calf on, idolatry is,
Totally. Yeah. My favorite definition was the one you shared, when a good thing becomes a God thing.
Yes.
I feel like it's just the simplest definition.
Tim,
I feel like you can take that definition and apply it to money. Hey, okay, money is a good thing.
But can't be
and it has become a God thing.
It's so funny, and I'm sure I'm not the first to say that, but Tim Keller's definition is when a good thing becomes an ultimate thing. And I'm like, why? Maybe I'm Baptist. I'm like, why would you not use another G?
Sure.
When a good thing becomes an ultimate thing, come on, Tim. When a good thing becomes a God thing, it's just like, So I think it's massive. It's one of the things, I think it points to, I don't know where we're going to go today, but I didn't talk beforehand about this, but it has to do with worship.
Yes.
It's the whole, I think why it's so central is because worship is so central to what it means to be human.
That's right.
And so what I love about idolatry, I don't love idolatry, but what I love about the theme of idolatry is I think it puts everybody on the same playing field. It's like everybody is a worshiper. It's not what you're worshiping. Or sorry, it's not if you're worshiping, it's what or who you're worshiping. Right. And in one of the best books on this, I don't know if you've ever heard of this book or you've read this book. You know who G.K. Beale is? G.K. Beale is a complete nerd. I love him, but I've never met him. But I mean, this guy, I heard him in an interview, said he reads while he brushes his teeth. Think how committed you have to be to reading.
I listen to podcasts while I brush my teeth. Does that count?
That's not as impressive as, I mean, my problem is when I brush my teeth, I move my head. Dude, it's so ridiculous. I still do it. I'm like, why? And Margie's like, why are you moving your head? You're already moving your hand. I'm like, I just want the extra power. So I'm like, you know, true story. So still to this day, dude, I do both. I don't know if like where I learned that. It's stupid, I know. But there's for me, I could never read while I do that. But anyway, G.K. Beale.
Yep.
He wrote, it's one of those, like, our listeners, or you can later Google it. He wrote a book, dude, it is literally about this thick. It's all on idolatry. And it says, but he was the first I ever heard. Now, I think Piper picks this up from him because G.K. Beale's an academic and Piper's a pastor.
Right.
He picks this up from him, which is, we become what we worship.
Yes.
And then the subtitle, to our restoration or our ruin. And that's always been a deep idea that I've never fully... So we know that we become what we worship. This is 2 Corinthians 3.
That's right.
Beholding the glory of God, we are transformed from one degree of glory to the other. It's like you become more like Jesus partly by worshiping Jesus. Yes. But I think you see this in anybody who becomes obsessed with an athlete. We're better at hiding this as we get older. This is most obvious in, I would say, like age 8 to 14. Mm-hmm. Somebody who becomes obsessed with, I don't care, Scotty Scheffler.
Yep.
Or LeBron James, or I don't even know who the popular people are today, Taylor Swift. They start to look like them. Mm-hmm. They start to dress like them. It's like, why? Because I'm using the word elastically. They worship them.
That's right.
They are an idol in their life. And you become what you worship, either to quote G.K. Beale, to your ruin or restoration, which is why I think one of the deepest things I've ever heard someone say, and then I've started to say it, I've said this a couple times in my sermons before, you've worshipped your way in, you have to worship your way out. That's right. I think that is what is uniquely Christian counseling, Christian care, Christian addiction, help recovery. It has a unique contribution of worship your way out. This is way deeper than a behavior. You've worshipped your way into this addiction, and the only way out is worshiping something bigger.
That's right. Maybe we can get into that more later. How do I escape or flee from my idols? But I think that you're hitting the nail on the head. You have to replace the idol. Because we're going to be worshiping something. It's like, and if we over time gradually begin to worship things that are not God.
Yes.
Let's say I'm worshiping money. I worship my way into money by prioritizing things and stuff and the nice car and that kind of thing. The way to get out of it is I have to replace what I'm worshiping.
And the thing is, you have to replace it with something better.
That's right.
You know, this is why cross addiction is such a big deal. I think of John Daly. John Daly.
Oh, yeah.
Every golfer is a gentleman except for John Daly. And John Daly is, I think every golfer loves John Daly because he makes them feel better about them. But John Daly is an interesting character because I don't know his whole story. My brother knows it. But, he has had cross addiction so many different times. Like, I think he gave up Diet Coke. He was drinking 21 Diet Cokes for 18 rounds.
Yes, I remember.
But then he became addicted to M&Ms. It's something like, I'm going to mess it up, And so, but this is actually an important principle is I do think that what's hard about addiction, if we're going to deal with that for a second, and I think to some extent, probably everybody listening can relate to a season of their life where they thought, and I'll give them a different word. Maybe they don't want to say addiction. Maybe they want to use a soft word, compulsion. Maybe they feel like I have a compulsion for this. And the problem is you need something better than it. And I think this is uniquely Christian because,
yes.
Jordan Peterson, who you and I have talked a lot about, not a Christian, but interesting, insightful thoughts. He basically, his PhD, I don't know if you know this, his PhD is in alcohol. So think about the brain of Jordan Peterson, the mind that God's given him, and his PhD was on alcohol and what it does to the brain.
Yes.
Obviously, it's one of the only substances that breaks the blood-brain barrier, which you understand more as in medicine. So that makes it unique. But basically, he said the problem with alcohol is everybody who has a problem with alcohol loves it. Mm-hmm. It is like the most fun substance for somebody who loves it. And it's a nucleus. Somebody who drinks a lot of alcohol also probably has a lot of friends who drink a lot of alcohol. Most likely they're married to a spouse who drinks a lot of alcohol. Their life involves a lot of alcohol. Their vacations involve a lot of alcohol. Their sports activities involve a lot of alcohol. And so you need something so much better than alcohol good luck.
That's right.
It's like, good luck
right.
finding that if you
Sure.
and we know Christ is. I'm saying you have to find something bigger than alcohol that affects every other area of your life. Well, you don't have many options. And obviously Christ in the church. And all of a sudden you get this is why, it's deep, but you need something new to worship and you need a new community.
That's right.
You need a new God and a new group.
My favorite thing that Peterson has to say about alcohol is he says that the person who is drunk or the person who's under the influence of alcohol, he knows that what he's doing is wrong. He just doesn't care about it.
It's deep, dude.
And I think that's actually very similar to sin in general. I tell college students all the time, it's like, guys, the essence of sin is this. I know this is wrong, but I don't care. Yeah. Like, do you want to know what the average 20-year-old who is crossing physical boundaries with his girlfriend on the college campus is thinking? They know it's wrong. They're thinking to themselves in the moment, I know this is wrong.
I don't care.
But I don't care.
That's right.
That's what it is. So let's keep going with the definition of idols. I brought this book because it has my favorite, most comprehensive view
I know what it is. We tell our
of
audience,
idolatry. So this book is called Gospel Eldership by Robert Thune. And it's got a brief chapter here on idolatry. And this quote on idols is from Martin Lloyd-Jones, who I know you love.
I love him.
It says this.
The doctor, as they called him.
That's right. I'd love to hear your thoughts as I read this. He says this, an idol is anything in our lives that occupies the place that should be occupied by God alone. Anything that is central in my life, anything that seems to me essential. An idol is anything by which I live and on which I depend. This is my favorite part. An idol is anything that holds such a controlling position in my life that it moves and rouses and attracts so much of my time and attention, my energy and money.
Yes.
Any thoughts about this?
Well, when you read that, I thought about how, there's certain words in the scriptures that are so similar, and I'm no Hebrew scholar, but I think this is true. In the word worship is the word sacrifice. They're almost indistinguishable in their use in the Old Testament. So another helpful, it's hard to diagnose yourself. It's easier to diagnose other people.
Sure.
It's like the old prophet said, I know how you're doing, how am I doing? I think you can tell somebody's idol by what they're sacrificing. And, and as I've thought about this, people will sacrifice their family. Tim Keller famously made that. He said, the average, I heard him say this years ago, he said the average New Yorker, is appalled by child sacrifice, yet the average investment banker is doing it.
That's right.
The way that he's had to organize his life to do what he's doing, he is metaphorically, proverbially, sacrificing his wife and family. I actually had a guy I discipled at Duke. I don't know if I've ever told you a story. His dad was an investment banker, strong Christian guy. And investment banker in New York City, like real investment banker. Mm-hmm. And he said when he was a brand new investment banker, he was up late one night with an old investment banker. This is sounds like a story out of a Quentin Tarantino movie I'm about to tell you here. But basically he said to this guy, he said, if you do this job, you can do this and one other thing. And he said, and so the guy I know says, so it's this in your family? He goes, no, it's this in my kids. I lost my wife.
Wow.
He told me that story, dude. He said you could choose one thing. He goes, so this in your family? He goes, this in my kids. And that's an extreme example, but I think there's often, so I think people sacrifice sacrifice their family. That's an easy one to think through. Mm-hmm. I think people sacrifice their health.
Yes.
That's a really big one. And I'm not just talking about the guy who's eating 14 Big Macs, but there's so many people who have idols of alcohol or food or who knows, video games. And they literally sacrifice their physical health, their sleep, everything else for that. A lot of people, this is a deep one, sacrifice their integrity. And so it's you don't think you've sacrificed anything. Well, accept your integrity. And you can get it back, but let's work on it. There's grace. We believe in restoration. And then a lot of people, I kind of said this one, but they sacrifice their future. Because, sin is, another thing that you and I have learned from Jordan Peterson is there are not many ways you can live your life and it work across time and many different people.
That's right.
And so you see a lot of people. I do think can't remember if we talked about this on the podcast. I know you and I have talked about this before, but I continually think, this is probably every generation, but I continually think we're going to bump our heads into a lot of 40, 50, 60-year-olds who were worshiping idols in their 20s and 30s, maybe even into their 40s. and realize this was not life-giving.
That's right.
And we're going to welcome him. We're going to minister to him, but it's going to be hard.
Well, it reminds me of The Coddling of the American Mind, which I know you recommended to our church months or a year ago. And essentially that book is about how parents are worshiping safety and comfort for their kids.
Yes.
And the problem with that is that these kids are growing up not resilient. They are fragile. They are emotionally unstable because parents have tried to protect them from everything there is to possibly to protect them from. And it has led to the exact opposite of what they intended.
Yes. Well, it reminds me, I don't know if we've talked about this before, you and I, but are you familiar with, I don't know who first came out with this, David Pallison or Tim Keller, but the 4 idols?
Yes.
We might want to talk about, when you said that, it reminded me of the 4 idols, which are comfort, control, approval, power.
Yes.
And basically what they say, and I think it's helpful, is they say those are the far idols, or we would say the deep idols.
Yeah, the root idols.
And a lot of the idols, if somebody loves money and that's their idol, what's an easy one to pick?
Sure.
It's a superficial, shallow idol that's really getting at a deeper idol. And the weird thing about that is, or the strange thing or sophisticated thing about that is, you and I could love money for different reasons. We could have the same near idol and have a different far idol.
Yes.
And so that's what makes counseling hard. That's what makes preaching hard. That's what makes repentance hard.
Sure.
How do I get at the deep idol?
Because you might love money for control,
Yep.
whereas I might want it because it makes me powerful.
Yeah, and somebody else might want it because they want their life to be comfortable.
That's right.
Well, if you take these, and I haven't done a lot on this, but I almost, to try to honor Tim Keller, I try to think, how would Tim Keller think through this? Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, if comfort is the far idol, the near idol is probably consumerism. Because never in a time have we been able to just buy comfort at a fairly affordable price and have it delivered in 2 days. So I think that's a big one. For approval, it has to be social media. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't other ways people are not on social media or are on social media, I'm saying, or the way it affects us. Mm-hmm. But I don't know many people who are going, social media is for my comfort. I don't think so. It's for it. You struggle with approval because you see all these beautiful men and women or whatever. Somebody's got a better marriage, better body, whatever. And then comfort, control. And so control, and you can help me because these last two are less clear for me, but control, I think in some ways it is the work-life balance that is like the greatest desire of millennials and younger. Whereas my parents never talked about a work-life balance, never really expected a work-life balance. But there's this, I will somehow control my life so that, also I think it maybe has to do with the fitness. And I will not get sick and I will whatever. And then the final one is power. And that's a little harder for me to go, what is the near idol with that? I mean, social media certainly could be power if you're very influential.
Sure.
Your job, if you are in the right career, if you have the right amount of money. But I just feel like you've got to get I think maybe what it is every 2 to 4 years, the obsession with politics. Which I have to admit,
we should talk about that.
Well, I'm a little guilty of that myself, just to be honest. But I'm saying, I think because I heard Dr. Moeller say recently in a podcast, I listen to the briefing every morning, as you know, but he just made he doesn't really say things without thinking about them very deeply. But he said something that the President of the United States is potentially the most powerful office in human history.
I believe it.
And when he said it, I'm like, that's right. You tend to think of Alexander the Great, or I tend to think of some king or emperor or Caesar. And I'm like, or some long-lost pope. And you're like, actually, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. I'm like, the president of Ukraine flies to the White House.
That's right.
Trump's calling Putin. Mm-hmm. Netanyahu gets here the first week he's here. I'm
That's
like,
right.
So this is not about Trump. I mean, I think the average in a constitutional republic where we get the benefit and blessing of electing a president and a Senate and all that. I think we feel that's where we probably feel the power struggle the most. I could be wrong on that, but I'm like, how does this hit everybody? Sure. The idol of power is probably shown most clearly in politics and at the every person's level by the next election cycle.
Yes. I think that over the last 10 to 15 years, I feel like the average American has begun to idolize politics more than ever before. Talk a little bit about politics becoming an idol. Well, like, how do we see this very practically in our church? Like I just think of like the average guy in his 50s or 60s who sits in his recliner, watches Fox News all night. And what started out as well-meaning interest has turned into this man looking to his political figure for hope and confidence in the future, which is obviously not helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think. So your specific question is because you made some good observation. What was your specific question?
It's
so I can think about it.
How do we see politics become an idol for people?
Well, I mean, there is, I don't know these terms real well, but like there is a populism, in Trump.
Sure.
I mean, there's a you've probably heard this before. They talk about, Lincoln would have never gotten elected if there was a television, just for how he looks. And and I've learned all this from Dr. Mueller, but then the debate between Nixon and JFK, you know what I'm talking about? So basically in that debate, those who listened to it on the radio thought Nixon won. And those who watched it thought JFK won because he was the better looking.
That's right.
Anyway, so that I'm not trying to avoid your question. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I know we cannot. I think I'm struggling to answer the question because I feel it's definitely wrong to have a political candidate be something you worship or something you put your ultimate hope in. I wonder if I'm thinking about it from my perspective, maybe some of my friends, people in church that I know that were passionate about this, and I think you feel like I think publicly the Christian ones go, we trust in the Lord, and then you get behind the scenes, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know, and then normally for the godly people I know, they would say something like, I don't know what's going to happen, I'm a little afraid, and then they would say something like, but I know if this goes the other way, God's in control, and the persecuted church is powerful. So it's hard because I think the average Christian has felt the stakes for pro-life or transgender issues or religious liberty. They felt them so strongly.
Sure.
And then you're looking for somebody to fix them.
Yes.
And so a part of me is sympathetic to it, but to say, we can't ultimately, and I'd have to think about, I'd love your thoughts. How do you think about that?
I think the question is, to what extent are you feeling anxious about particular elections?
Yes.
Because I think that Christians, we ought to be appropriately concerned about everyone who gets elected. Like we should never withdraw from the polls. We should be engaged politically.
Yep.
I think that politics becomes an idol when we begin to look to the future with hope or fear, completely based off of who gets elected or who doesn't get elected.
Yes.
And so I think the Christian perspective, whenever any president is elected, is, okay, well, I may be more happy that this person is elected than this person, but at the same time, I'm not looking to this person for my comfort.
Yes.
I'm not looking to them for hope or security or really much other than just, hey, I think this person's going to do a good job. Something I also think is really interesting is, and I heard this years ago, actually from Pastor JD, who you and I are familiar with. He talked about how when it comes to politics, Christians ought to have a lot of humility in that we don't understand the short-term and long-term effects of every person who gets elected.
Yeah, you don't know if is this an Artaxerxes? Is this a Nebuchadnezzar? Who is this that we're electing?
Yes.
And who is God? How is God? Is this, Josiah, or is this Jezebel? Or is this?
We don't know.
Who knows?
That's
and
right.
you don't know. And I think this is something I learned from Josh Howerton, who we know is. And I think the reason that, especially as a pastor, or as a church, that you really can't platform, or what's the phrase? Not platform. What's it called when you tell somebody who you're going to vote for? Endorse.
Yeah.
You can't endorse a candidate. Basically, he said, and I think he's right on this, he said, because as soon as you do that, you have this feeling that you have to defend everything that they do. And for me, it's like as I watch any candidate, I'm like, obviously some I like more than others.
Sure.
Some I feel like I'm more hopeful than others, but other times I'm like, there's not one candidate that I'm like, I love everything that they do, and I think they're the savior. It's like they're fallen political. And I think Larry Osborne is the first who ever said, and I've taken it, God is in control of those who are in control.
Yes.
And I think that has to be the deepest belief that will help you avoid idolatry. And then I think I said this in a sermon a couple of months ago, but I do think that whoever we idolize, we will soon demonize. And so I do think what happens is you'll watch this in politics. Somebody who they idolize, they demonize because they voted one way wrong. It's like,
that's right.
Speaker Mike Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
He would be a classic example of somebody that most conservatives were super excited about. And then you realize he's got a little different on Ukraine, or he can't get this through, or he's the budget. And it's like, he's an imposter.
Right.
He's a rhino.
Right.
I'm like,
Oh,
did we just idolize and then demonize? It's like,
Yeah.
he's a broken, fallen man
right.
who's trying to lead the house.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Who's just 1 or 2 votes away from being demonized by his own party.
Yes.
Which is really interesting.
Yep.
I want to shift gears a little bit. So I'm going to read Exodus 20, verses 3, 4, and 5. This is arguably the most well-known passage in the Old Testament
you're going to
about
the
idolatry.
10 Commandments.
That's right, 10 Commandments. This is before Exodus 32 with the golden calf, which is maybe the most popular story of idolatry in the Old Testament. Exodus 23 says this, "You shall have no other gods before me." First commandment. Second commandment, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image or an idol, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God." Mm-hmm. Talk to me about God being a jealous God, because I feel like this is a topic that non-Christians, whenever they hear that God is a jealous God, they are confused, and they're just like, how is this a good thing that God is jealous?
Well, I always joke, he's not jealous of you, he's jealous for you. He's not like, man, I wish I had Spencer's watch. You know, he's not that. But I think the whole idea, and this is a C.S. Lewis insight, because C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Weight of Glory, which is a short book on the Psalms, he admits in that book about how he used to really struggle, I think even as a new believer, with God wanting to be praised. And he kind of said he felt like an old woman. This is C.S. Lewis's words. An old woman wanting to be noticed. I'm 75, but notice my outfit and notice my hat. You better tell me I look nice when I walk in the room. And he later said what he noticed was actually God wanted us to praise him because he was the most worthy of praise, and we are meant to do it, and we will most enjoy it when we're doing it.
That's right.
So that's my long answer to go. I think what it means that God is a jealous God is it means all the things we think it does, in the sense of we should be scared because a jealous husband is a scary thing and all that.
Oh, exactly.
But God is jealous for us. He wants our, you love this definition of love. He's committed to our highest good.
That's right.
And so that means him. And that means he's jealous, just like we are for our wives or for our kids. He's jealous of anything that gets in the way. Exactly.
I think about at home every once in a while, I'll be on my phone. Let's say it's 8 p.m. We put the kids down and I'm just glued to my phone more than I should be. And Olivia, understandably so, gets frustrated that I'm on my phone a little bit too much. And you could say that she is jealous for my attention and my affection.
Yes.
And you could ask this question, is it a good thing that she's jealous? I would think so.
I think
because
so.
The opposite is that she just doesn't care.
Yeah.
And in the same way, God is deserving of our affection.
Well said.
He's deserving of our attention. And so it only makes sense that he's a jealous God. He is jealous for us, like you said.
Well, the opposite of love is not jealousy. The opposite of love is indifference.
That's right.
And so exactly what you're saying right there. That's more scary that God would. And that is what the New Testament talks about as the wrath of abandonment. It's where God gives you over.
Yes.
And that's not
terrifying.
That's
Romans
way
1.
more terrifying than God's jealousy.
Yes. The passive wrath of God.
Exactly. So,
yes. That's good. I want to ask you a very popular question that I have heard many times here over the last few years, and that is related to Two Cities Church and our position on crosses.
So interesting.
So as you know, Pastor Kyle, as the lead pastor of this church, we don't have many large crosses positioned in our church. We don't have a huge one in the hall, in the
do we ever put them on the screens while we're singing?
We do. So we sometimes will have the crosses on the screen, but we don't have one in the lobby. We don't have one in the auditorium. Let me frame this question for you. So some people will argue that crosses are not ideal because they obscure God's glory. Yeah. So J.I. Packer, for example, in his book Knowing God, he talks about it in one of the first few chapters. He says that images are not good because they obscure the glory of God and they don't tell the whole story.
He would also say probably don't watch The Chosen.
That's exactly what I want to talk about that also.
But
for the crosses, so I can remember I read Knowing God by J.I. Packer back in college, and at the time I wore a necklace that had a cross on it. And after I read the chapter,
I could see you doing this.
I felt convicted, and I was like, I'm pretty sympathetic to this view. Now, I wasn't walking around scolding those who were wearing crosses around their neck, but I was like, I think that I'm in agreement that this does not tell the full story, because J.I. Packer, what he says is that the cross tells you a lot about the humanity of Jesus, but doesn't tell you a lot about his deity. It talks about the death of Jesus, but doesn't talk about the resurrection of Jesus. And so talk to us a little bit about the cross.
Yeah, so at our church, here's the way I would say it. Not having a cross is more circumstantial than convictional.
Yes, that's right.
It is not a deep conviction. We did not sit around and say there will be no crosses.
Sure.
It was more of a like, it's not something the Bible necessitates.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a biblical command that the church must have a cross. There is certainly a good place to say in tradition. One of the churches that you and I admire, 1122, massive crosses.
Huge.
I mean, I don't think anymore, but used to preach. I think Joby used to preach with a massive cross on the stage. They're hanging on the walls. There's one on the building outside. And part of it is, I think the whole I've been crucified with Christ, and
yes.
I preach Christ crucified, and I came to you, First Corinthians 15, what is first importance, all that. So I would say it's more circumstantial than convictional.
Yes.
We are not against having a cross. We just did not go out of our way to put them there.
That's right.
I think that's why you'll see them occasionally in a video. That's why you'll see them in the background for certain lyrics.
That's right.
I think I probably lean more toward the not simplistic necessarily, of not having a lot of pomp and circumstance and in the church service. I think it was you and I had this conversation a different time, but I do think a lot of Protestantism is a response to Roman Catholicism.
That's right.
I think a lot of what you're seeing is the Catholic Church didn't just have the cross.
Yes.
They have the crucifix.
Yes.
And if our listeners don't know the difference between that, the crucifix still has Jesus on it.
Yes.
Now that, I think, is an unhelpful.
That's right.
It's like Christ is... I remember to me, honestly, I remember thinking, and this sounds so irreverent, but I remember seeing it up there and then thinking, as a little boy, Jesus is in good shape. Because they would always have him up there. He'd have a six-pack.
That's right.
And he'd be stretched out. And I just remember, I'm 7, 8, going, Jesus was in good shape. I'm like, is that the thought I should be having about Jesus' body and what it looked like? And so I think in response to that, the Puritans and the Protestants, and in a response to all, for example, when the Pope gets elected, whatever it's called, and the smoke and the bishops and the gowns, there is so much pomp and circumstance.
Yes.
Everything is so visual that I think the John Stotts, the J.I. Packers, the Dr. Mollers, they're so committed to it's a religion of the ear,
yes,
not a religion of the eye.
That's right.
And so our conviction would be Christianity is a religion of the ear, not a religion of the eye. Yet we preach the gospel to the eye in the Lord's Supper and baptism anyway. So I'd be fine preaching the gospel to the eye with the cross. It'd probably be something I would talk about if we had it, if that made sense.
Sure.
Hey guys, and the reason we have a cross hanging in the front of our church is we believe Jesus Christ dead, buried, and raised is your hope.
Amen.
But I'd always try to connect the cross to the empty tomb. Dave, when asked this question, often, this, we'll talk about, hey, I love the cross. Why doesn't every church have an empty tomb?
That's right.
Because actually, what's more unique is the empty tomb than the cross, and he's exactly right.
That's right. Let's talk a little about a couple of different words. So you mentioned the crucifix in the Catholic Church. I'm going to give you 3 words: appreciation, veneration, and then worship. So from an evangelical Christian standpoint, I think all of us could agree appreciation is a good thing. We can appreciate the Word of God. We can appreciate good books, things of that nature. Worship is also a good thing. We worship God alone through singing, through reading the Word, through preaching the Word. Veneration is the category in the Catholic Church that the normal evangelical Christian would have a problem with. I'm thinking primarily of Catholics kneeling before the crucifix, kneeling before images of Mary.
Oh, yeah. A lot of relics, a lot of times.
That's right.
Maybe the praying of the saints. I'm just trying to think. Again, you have to understand that when I say I was Catholic, I was.
Sure.
But I was nominal Catholic.
Sure.
And I was probably poorly educated nominal Catholic, maybe by God's grace, but poorly educated nominal Catholic till I was 16. So I've now been 24 years out of Catholicism. So I'm less familiar, because every once in a while I do talk about being a nominal Catholic. And what'll happen oftentimes, you're not doing this, I'm saying, but oftentimes, probably once a month, someone comes up to me to ask me a question about being Catholic. I'm like, maybe I need to stop telling people I was a nominal Catholic, because I'm like out of it.
Sure. Well, my understanding is that the veneration category is when Catholics will almost flirt with honoring images or honoring saints, honoring Mary in a way that we would describe as unhelpful or not healthy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I completely agree. I struggle with all of that stuff with the Catholic Church. Andy Davis, who was here last summer, he had a great line. He would say, as I've told you many times, he would say the deepest things just like it was like nothing. He said, the praying to the saints is thinly veiled polytheism.
Wow. That is deep.
It's like, did you just say all that in one sentence? He said it's basically a form of polytheism.
Yep.
And it is. I want to respectfully, to our Catholic friends. But if you think about it, because I know this, like, I mean, I know some serious Catholics, and I'm going to get this wrong, exactly the names. But if you lose something, I don't know if you know about this. If you lose something, you pray to Saint Anne.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. You know, if you're struggling with infertility, you pray to a different saint. There are saints that have been venerated and lifted up.
Yes.
And they have a certain, it's not just like you should talk to them. I'd have a problem with that in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But no, you should pray to them and ask them to help you, and they have domains and spheres of help.
Yes.
And that's why when you understand that, you go, that's polytheism. There's the rain god in the old, you know, in the old times. There's the sun god. There's the fertility god. It's like the Catholic Church has that. I don't want to speak too harshly, but the Catholic Church has that. I'm not saying the average person is thinking this way.
Right.
That's in the Catholic Church, but I'm talking official Catholic teaching and doctrine. Sorry, lots of words there.
That's good. It's good. One more question about idolatry based off this text. So you mentioned the chosen. So I'm going to give you just the stereotypical argument against the chosen, and you can give me a response. So let's say you are a Harry Potter fan. Okay. Have you read the Harry Potter books?
My kids have read all of them. I've seen all the movies. I have not read all the books.
Okay. Well,
they're long. They're long and they get longer.
I grew up a part of the Harry Potter generation. I grew up with Harry Potter.
Yeah, you're right. You're
as
right.
the books were being released, I was
right.
essentially the same age as Harry in the books, and so it was huge. Okay, I can remember the Harry Potter that was drawn on the books is what I used to think of when I read Harry Potter, and my thought of Harry Potter was influenced only by the cover of the book and what I read about Harry in the books. And then the movies came out. And now if you were to say to me, Harry Potter, my immediate thought is Daniel Radcliffe.
Yes.
Who is the actor in the Harry Potter series.
And particularly how he dresses, his glasses.
That's right, how he talks, all these things. And so the argument against shows like The Chosen are well-meaning, Bible-believing Christians might watch this show, and instead of thinking of the Jesus that they think of when they read Scripture, they might begin to think of this Hollywood depiction of Jesus. So maybe just talk a little bit about how do we, reject, receive, redeem shows like The Chosen, The Passion of the Christ, things of that nature. How do we think about this?
You're right, because I think for a long time, probably for 20 years, when people thought of Jesus, they thought of Jim Caviezel.
That's right.
Because that movie, it's hard. Again, I was a freshman in college when that came out. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing you were probably in 8th grade or something.
Sounds right.
Sounds right. So when that movie came out, it was such a big deal that we rented out an entire theater. Our campus ministry did, filled a theater. So, that movie it was controversial that he was making it. It was all in Aramaic. Anyway, so there was a whole time where I do think a lot of people thought, when I think of Jesus, I think of Jim Caviezel. At the same time, I'm like, I think it deepened people's understanding of the suffering of Christ. At the same time, it emphasized the physical suffering over the spiritual suffering. That's right. I'll tell you an interesting story, then I'll try to answer it. My family watched all of the House of David. Have you seen it?
No.
So House of David is a series by Amazon Prime. Do you know about this?
I've heard about it, but I haven't
very
watched it.
famous for a small slice. It was the number one show on Amazon. So well done. I would say maybe one notch below Chosen in quality, but good.
Yep.
The story picks up with Goliath, and I'm not going to ruin anything. The story picks up with David and Goliath, and then it goes 2 years earlier. And the final episode is him back with David and Goliath.
Sure.
So the first season is just that section. Well, we're watching it. And this doesn't ruin anything, because if you watch 10 minutes, you'll learn this into the show. When he fights David and Goliath, he goes to fight David and Goliath, and David throws a spear, and Goliath throws a spear, and it hits him. Now, in my imagination, I had thought that David just shows up, there's no fight.
Sure.
And he does the rocks. But if you read the text, it ain't clear what happens.
Right.
So it was an interesting moment for me to go, this series is making me be even more imaginative. So David, this doesn't ruin anything either, but David, in the story, his mom dies when he's young. Well, go try to find anything about David's mom. There's not much in there. Mm-hmm. And the harp he carries the rest of his life was his mother's harp.
Wow.
So I'm like, dude, this is bringing some romance, some feeling to this whole. And one of her last words to him before she dies is deep calls to deep. Well, it's part of the Psalms. Mm-hmm. So telling my own personal experience, of course, sorry, that's King David, not Jesus. So I'm not necessarily tempted to idolize.
Sure.
Or maybe idolize, but not the same way.
Yep.
So I think I tend to probably be very gracious in these areas and feel a little bit more like the idealism in me has died while I still want to hold to ideals.
Yep.
I think that shows like The Chosen, either the Christian is mature enough to know the difference, that'd be a small majority, and they're fine. I think God uses it to wake a lot of people up that were sleepy Christians or whatever phrase we want to use, nominal Christians, and they use the story of The Chosen. Or I think the main aim is to welcome people in for the first time.
Sure.
I think that's what the reason the Green family who owns Hobby Lobby and the Cathy family who owns Chick-fil-A, from what I understand, the reason they're throwing tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars at this stuff is not just they want to disciple Christians, they want to reach non-Christians. So I don't think I don't believe we're going beyond Scripture to do it. But I think we need to do it. Like I do think it's possible to watch The Chosen and potentially have too warm of a view of Jesus.
Right.
Because he is, it's probably a good yin to the yang.
Sure.
But if you watch it, I think the average person who watches it goes, wow, he's really normal.
Right.
And he's really funny. And he's joking with his disciples.
Sure. It humanizes them.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I think you lose potentially the divinity of Christ in some of these things.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those categories.
It's an interesting conversation.
Like you've spoken before, reject, receive, redeem. Okay, it gets weird if we just automatically reject things like this.
Yes.
It also gets a little bit weird if we just receive it without giving any thought or consideration as to whether or not this is healthy to consider. And so the middle category, whether it be The Chosen or Halloween or just lots of things, is to try to redeem this, take the parts that are valuable, reject the things that are not valuable, and then keep going from there.
Well, maybe I'll end by saying this. I think for me, it was really a humbling experience to watch The House of David with my kids, because they kept asking me, Dad, did that really happen? Dad, did that really happen? And I was like, I don't know. Let me check. And it actually drove me back to the Bible because you got Joab showing up, for example, who we know later, David and Joab are tight.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he shows up early, dude. And I'm starting to think, when does Joab show up? So for me, I would actually say it drew me more to the Bible. Not like, and they didn't do anything that I found that was overtly unbiblical.
Sure.
They just have so many things that are non-biblical.
Yep.
That you're just like, was Joab's sister really? Oh, there's nothing about Joab's sister.
Right.
Okay. You added that, but that's interesting, kind of thing.
That's good. Last question I'll ask. So let's say someone is struggling with any kind of idolatry. Maybe someone is idolizing marriage, they're idolizing children, they're idolizing money. How would you pastorally encourage them to flee from their idols, replace their idols? Like, very practically, what are some things they could do to escape the idolatry that they are experiencing?
I mean, based on everything we've talked about, I do think naming it, saying it out loud, marriage is an idol for me.
Yes.
Or my spouse is an idol, or my, whatever it is, my job is an idol. I think there's a real power in just, again, I'm a big fan of one person, two people. That's it. You tell. And then I think having the honest conversation, what is this idol taking from me? What is it? Is it taking my peace? Is it taking my joy?
Yes.
Is it taking my health? And maybe I'm trying to like Paul David Tripp, Tim Keller this, like, what am I looking for in this that I can find in Christ? Because, a deep study on the worship of the golden calf, which I haven't done in a while, when you look at it, there's a lot of great things about that idol. It's strong. Mm-hmm. It's not immediately from what I've understood, in the original language, as you read it and you look at the story, it's not an immediate rejection of God. It's trying to do. God is strong. God is the God of resources. So let's make a God that's strong, full of gold. It wasn't like we're done with Yahweh.
Right.
And so I think a lot of times it's, man, you were looking for something. One of my favorite lines of G.K. Chesterton ever is, the man who knocks on the brothel door is looking for God. And I love that because it's so shocking. Really? Yeah, really. He just doesn't know that pleasure or that excitement that he's trying to find at the brothel is found in a pure spiritual sense in a relationship with God. That's hard to explain. Physical pleasure and hedonism, you can explain to a 4-year-old. Sugar tastes good. It's hard to get the spiritual taste buds, as one of my mentors used to call them. It's hard to get the right spiritual taste buds and go, this is the pleasure of obedience.
That's right.
This is what lingering in God's presence does. This, you get it. So
yeah, it's good. It's good. Well, thanks for all your time.
Love it, man.
Really great
topic.
Insights on idolatry. I think that our hope for each other and our hope for our church is that we will not allow good things to become God things.
Amen.
And we will see you again next time on Open Bible, Open Life.